Good evening, everyone. My name is Dee Merricks. I'm the pastor of Wilmore United Methodist Church, and I am, I guess, your host for tonight's webinar of Keeping Kentucky Connected. We are going to hear from some of our campus ministers about how they are coping, how their students are coping, and just what ministry is like for them right now during this season of COVID-19. I serve as the leader of the higher education team, the team that's for higher education and campus ministry here in the conference. And so it's my joy to be able to check in with these campus ministers from time to time, to hear about what they're doing, to understand their ministries. And so I'm really excited to be able to be with you tonight and give a chance for them to share more about what they're doing so that you can learn what it's like for them. Many of you are in local churches and you know what it's like for your church, but how do you do campus ministry when you can't really be with students? And so they're going to give us a clue to that tonight. So I want them to introduce themselves before we get into some of our questions. We're going to start with Ben Martin. So if you would just introduce yourself and where you're serving and how long you've been serving in that role.
Like I said, my name is Ben Martin. I'm serving currently at Lindsey Wilson College, and this is my first semester as campus pastor, and it has been an exciting adventure so far, and I look forward to where this is going down the road.
Hey everybody, I'm Brandon McGinnis, and I am in year 4 at Eastern Kentucky Wesley Foundation.
Hi everyone, I'm David Miller, and I'm in my 17th year as the chaplain at Union College.
And I'm Renee Jennings. I'm at Northern Kentucky University, and I am starting my 5th year in ministry here.
Well, thank you all for being here. My first question, as many of us know, things are not the same for students as they come back to campus this semester. There's a lot of restrictions, there's a lot of rules. And so really, can you just tell us about your students and how are they coping right now with being on campus during this time of COVID-19? Renee, we'll let you go first.
Absolutely. So the way students are coping kind of been dictated by the way campus has been responding. Campus has been pretty serious about students not congregating together, not really hanging out on campus a lot. And so I think a lot of our students kind of came into the semester really unsure of how things were going to go. But I feel like they've actually been really great about finding ways to foster community for themselves. And I think that's been really helpful. I think a lot of them felt very isolated over the end of the spring and the summer. So they've been really creative and really great about finding ways to safely gather together in some smaller groups and really being very intentional about reaching out to each other and inviting friends to things as well. So they've been really great about fostering community for themselves during this time. So I think that's been a really big thing for them.
That's good. Thank you. Brandon, how are your students coping?
Sure. EKU, they've been, the institution itself, EKU, has been pretty strict in their guidelines for what they've been accepting or not allowing happen on campus for students. And so it's been quite an adjustment. Similar to what Renee was saying, that since they went home in mid-March and many of them then didn't have summer jobs or internships because those were canceled as well, they were really excited to be back on campus. And so I think there was a lot of apprehension about, even with the guidelines in place, that they were still going to do whatever they wanted to. But coping wise, I think they have been pretty adaptable during all of this. They really have kind of taken what has been given to them and trying to make the best out of it. Freshmen don't know campus life any different because this is their only experience about being on campus. Many of the upperclassmen are their life on campus is somewhat unchanged because their classes are almost all still in person, and they're doing okay. And then there's another than just large portion of the campus and student life. They're just still trying to figure it out. We're in week 6 here at EKU, and it still feels like it's week 1 because everything just feels so different, as you can imagine, and so new. So it's even things like having to eat meals all outside, and very, very, very little activity as far as student organizations being able to meet on campus. And so it's just been really hard. And there's a lot of computer fatigue and Zoom fatigue, and having to do almost all their learning by themselves instead of being in classrooms now. And so that's kind of wearing on them. But I would say they are learning how to roll with it pretty good in the midst of all this.
Yeah. David, Ben, either one of you want to share about how your students are coping right now?
Sure, I can share. Union is having in-person classes to an extent. Any student, or for that matter, faculty or staff member, was able to say, I don't feel comfortable coming to campus. And so we have perhaps at this point, maybe a third of our undergraduate students who have opted to have an online experience only. And that means about 2/3 are on campus. Those who are on campus, the classes are the way that they are social distancing, because we couldn't double or triple the size of our classes or our classrooms overnight, is that 1 day a week, half of the students will be in the classroom in person. The other half will be digitally present in some way, whether that's Zoom or Teams or some other way that the professor has designated. And then they will switch. So the college has been very permissive about that and has not put down strict guidelines about why a student, or as I said, even a faculty or staff member might choose that, and has allowed students to, even in the middle of the semester, say, I don't think this is working for me. I'm going to go home and I'm going to do everything online. And so our list of online only students has grown over the semester, but as I said, right now it's about a third, 2/3 on campus. None of our clubs and organizations are allowed to have any kind of in-person meetings, with the exception of our athletic teams that are fall athletes who are continuing to have a season. Some of our athletic teams are not having their season, some of our fall teams. And the teams were given the choice as well, whether they are going to compete or whether they're going to push things back. And even though our small school, we were in the NAIA, and even though the men's soccer NAIA, the conferences are still having competition this fall, our men's soccer team voted and said they're not going to. They don't feel comfortable doing that. The women's soccer team, on the other hand, decided, no, everything's going all right. We feel safe, and we're going to go ahead and compete. They're not allowing any fans in the stands, and so it's a surreal kind of thing, as we've watched sports on TV with no fans as well recently. But that is kind of permeating the entire campus experience. About 70% of our students are athletes. They're not all fall athletes. So like I said, that kind of is setting the stage for their experience on campus. All of our commons areas are blocked off. No place in campus for students to congregate. Right now, even our cafeteria is only open for takeout. We started this semester with a social distanced in the cafeteria experience, but we did have a spike among one of our teams of COVID cases. We went ahead and it was required for everybody who came back to campus, employee, student alike, to have a a negative COVID test within the previous 7 days of coming back to campus. And so anybody who came back to campus had been tested negative very recently. But in one of the fall teams, kind of had a little outbreak, a small outbreak. And so we're going to test everybody on that team. And I think that scared the others, said, well, we can't be doing these kind of things. We really have to follow these rules, and we really have to mask up, or we're going to mess our whole experience up. We're all going to have to go home. And so I've been very proud of how students have responded to that. My particular students in the campus ministries and the students that I'm teaching really are showing resilience. Of course, everybody's got COVID fatigue, whether they have COVID or not, have had pandemic fatigue, Zoom fatigue. But my student leaders are finding new and fresh ways to do things online. All of our campus ministries activities are having to be online. And so we decided we couldn't do one of our very long-standing traditional events called Eat, Pray, Fun, because we couldn't get together and eat. And in one of our brainstorming sessions this past week, one of my students who had attended the Interfaith Leadership Institute, which was online this year, last Thursday, said that some of the students that they were on this Zoom conference call with talked about having a ministry on their campus where the participants, the students, received boxes of ingredients and Zoomed with each other while they were cooking. So it's not exactly how things went when we cooked a home-cooked meal in our spiritual life house, had devotions, and did some kind of fun activity. But they came up with this brainstorm, and we're going to kick it around with the larger group of student leaders at our leadership meeting this coming Monday. And I could see maybe giving that a shot at least. So I think they're coping in resilient ways and looking for innovative ways to stay in touch with each other.
That's good. Thank you, David. Ben, how are things at Lindsey Wilson?
Just like what else is saying, our students have been really good about adjusting and finding new ways to be creative in their ministries and outreach to the student body and faculty and staff. Our administration did a great job of putting together a game plan. They actually put together a game plan book, if you will, and handed it to all the faculty and staff and students, really laying out the specifics about how we were going to approach school this year, and how the emphasis is really that we are better together, and it's going to take us being better together to get to the end of the semester. The end of the semester, of course, being our goal as an institution. And what that has done is forced our campus ministry to kind of repaint how we're going to approach campus ministry. And we've gone, because of the limitations set in our seating capacity, in both chapel and in our worship services and our discipleship groups. Our chapel facility would normally seat 80 people, and we've been limited to 12. And our worship facility as well, we've been limited to probably about 40 people. So we've got desks in our worship facility, and those are our dividing lines. The desks are put 6 feet across, and we say, we tell students, let's keep rules and let's socially distance. Let's make room for Jesus. Okay, that's what we're going with that little tagline. But because of the limited capacity for the in-person, we've done live feeds on Instagram and Facebook, and through the service provided by the school. And we've been able to actually reach more people in our extended campuses because of the live feed that we've been forced to take on. So our extended campuses are really pouring in with the email saying how much they appreciate the live feed, and especially in chapel service, because we record that now and then we send it out. It's also forced us to really put an emphasis on what we call missional communities. And what I mean by that is students doing life and doing ministry where other students outside campus ministry are already at. So we treat our dorm rooms and our dormitories as our neighborhoods. So we have students taking on the responsibility of reaching out to just a floor, whatever floor they're on. And so we do a lot of outside events too. We started the year with campus ministry with a Better Together Unity event out in the quad behind the chapel in the yard. And we just did an outside event called See You at the Bell. We have a bell campus. And we prayer walk to school, and we were able to do so safely. And that was well attended. So it's just, there is a lot of negative with the pandemic. There's a lot to sit around and think about, this is bad. This is not allowing us to do what we normally would do. But on the other side of that, it's really spurred a creative side that I'm not going to say it wasn't there, but it's really been fueled and fired up for these students to be as creative as they want to be within the parameters of our game plan so that everybody's safe.
That's good. Thank you. I know through talking to some of you that it's not just, the students who are coping, but also each one of you are having to cope in some way. Ministry doesn't look the same as it did last fall. Events have had to change, and you've already shared a little bit how your ministries have changed, but I think we would just love to hear how you are coping. So what is it like for you right now? How are you kind of dealing with these changes, and what's helping you to get through this time, which can be kind of difficult because you're used to spending a lot of time with people, and now you do it maybe mostly through Zoom. You have some personal contact, but it's just not the same. So how are each of you coping right now? And before one of you starts answering, I forgot to mention earlier, we do have a Q&A box available. So anybody who's watching has a particular question for the group or for just one campus minister, you're welcome to throw that into the Q&A box, and we will keep an eye on that throughout our time. So I don't know who wants to go first, but how are you coping right now as you go along through the semester?
I don't know. I think this was kind of a coping thing at the beginning of the semester, because a lot of students came in with, oh my gosh, we're not going to get to do fall retreat. We might not get to do mission trip. There was a lot of, we probably won't get to do some things that we've done in the past that have been really meaningful for our ministry. And so one of the things that we did and that I did over the summer, and why I did this with my students, is we actually had like a lament service. Of being like, we need to just like say we're disappointed with the stuff that we're not going to be able to do, and then like we're gonna say it, we're gonna be sad about it, and then we are going to move on, and we are going to figure out what we can do. And so I think it was important to do that, especially like for some of my seniors that are really upset that they're not going to be able to do fall retreat and potentially mission trip their senior year. I think it was important to kind of set the scene for the semester with being like, yeah, things are gonna look different, but we're gonna get through this, and we will figure out ways to still do ministry together. It just might not be the things that we're really familiar with. And I think the students responded really well to that, and like I said, it was really helpful for me too. Because that's also stuff that I really love to do with students, and bonding opportunities. And, I think times and places where you just really connect with your students is through some of those things like retreats and stuff like that we're just not going to be able to do. And so I think it was important to just recognize that first of all, and kind of be able to let that go. And I think that really helped with kind of getting the creativity then going of saying, okay, if we can't do fall retreat, what can we do? And so, like I said, I think it was just important to voice that, of being like, things are going to look different, but things are going to be all right. We'll figure it out.
That's good. Thank you.
Yeah, I was really struggling during the summer, because typically I use the summer months to plan for the school year, and there was just almost no way to plan because didn't know what was going to be happening and didn't know what guidelines we were working with. And so it was just a real struggle during the summer. And, you know, to be really honest, part of me was kind of just hoping that they wouldn't even let students back on campus, just because that way didn't have to deal with doing things a different way. Would just have to go, well, we'll make the best of what we got, and we can just do stuff online from wherever students are doing their schooling from home. And then I started to meet with our leadership a couple times over the summer. And it was really encouraging to hear them kind of just have this this real just sense of perseverance, that it was like, we'll work with whatever we got, because we would rather, as long as we're playing by the rules in any way we can, to still meet together and meet in our groups, even if that's online. And so that kind of got me excited about the semester. And then it's just been a roller coaster, because then as this semester was starting, like Renee was saying, every conversation was just like, well, we can't do that. Or like, oh, we don't get to go on fall retreat, or spring break has already been canceled and we can't go on trips. We can't do anything together like that. And so it was just very limiting. And so like I said, every conversation just had that feel of just having to like say, oh, we can't, I'm sorry, we can't. And then a couple weeks into the semester, there was just that another shift of seeing how serious the students were taking the pandemic, and respecting the guidelines and doing things right in order to stay on campus, because I really do believe they would much rather be on campus than just be at home. And so then the kind of like the energy began to build in me as well, because they were just exhibiting this like, this is the chance that we have in front of us, and so let's do our best to live into this moment. And so it's been this thing where it has forced me, and I say that in a good way, it's really forced me in this season of ministry to be very intentional with like one-on-one time with students. Used to be you would just show up at our building and there'd be a few there hanging out, or if we'd have an event, then people would roll in, you know, half hour beforehand and hang out afterwards. And so the building just kind of had that very homey hangout type of feel. But because we can't use our space in that way anymore, it has to be very much like, hey, I'm going to be on campus during these times. Who wants to meet during these times? Or let's grab lunch, or swing by the building and we can talk about this. And so it's really made me much more proactive in just my relationship with the students, rather than just kind of waiting to see who's around and then talking to them. And so that's I guess that's a way that I've been coping. Like, I guess that's a good version of coping, that just have been way more active in that kind of seeking out students. And so it's different because I don't get to see students nearly as much face to face. And like David was saying, all of our events at EKU have been online so far. So we might have the possibility in the coming weeks of doing some online, on campus worship, which we're excited about, just to be in the room again. So we're trying to learn, and I'm trying to learn to just not get stuck in any one place, because the everything about this pandemic is changing so fast. It's really kind of encouraging me to be okay with that change as well, and just hold on to things really loosely and just take it as it comes, and take each day and each week, and just approach it that way. So kind of doing my best to just keep moving forward, because that's what we have to do in this, to not get stuck moving backwards or getting too stale in it.
And just to jump in, because there's something, I remembered something as you were talking. I think the other thing that I kind of had to deal with and kind of get over at the beginning of the semester was like the feeling of being the bad guy, because I was the one that had to be like, no, we can't do fall retreat. I don't know if we're going to be able to do mission trip. No, you need to wear your mask if you're in the house, and having to kind of be the one breaking bad news all the time, or being the one kind of like policing the building and stuff like that. I think it's really easy sometimes, especially when your ministry is so relational and like really depends on having some really good like credibility almost with your students, to suddenly kind of be forced in that role was really kind of jarring first, to be like, okay, I have to like sit on people and like remind them to follow rules and all this kind of stuff. And so I think that was also something to have to kind of get over at the beginning of the semester. And we've been doing well with that, but I very definitely just like felt like such, you know, just such a bad guy. Like I was spoiling everyone's fun, you know, coming back on campus and everything. And so that was hard to get over at the beginning of the semester.
Ben, you're kind of the new kid. So what's it been like for you to be new to that role, but also to try to cope with all this time?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm the new kid on the block, so I don't really know anything different. But the way I'm coping with this is by drinking lots and lots of coffee and staying in touch with my student leadership and just pouring into their well-being and watching them grow and watching them pour into others. So I told my student leadership at the beginning, I said, my job is to make sure that you're not burning out, that you continue to have a fire and a passion for reaching students in ministry, no matter what that looks like. And in our meetings on Thursdays, we kind of do what Renee was talking about. Before we talk about anything, any programming, any ideas, any visioning, we spend about 30 minutes just checking in with each other and just making sure that we're holding each other accountable to who we are called to be in campus ministry, in relationship to and for each other, because it's very important to me that the relationships that are happening there spill over into the relationships that they are fostering with other students on campus. So that's kind of where I've been right now as I'm coping with this new world and students. I'm just making sure that my student leaders are in good places, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and we make a safe place for them to voice their concerns or their stressors, that they can leave with a kill, if you will, and a solid mind, a solid heart. And I think it's important for them to know they have that place to just come in and throw their backpacks down and just kind of breathe for a minute, because they have a tendency to carry the load and the burden of everybody else that's going that is around them and what they're going through. So that's kind of one of my roles and responsibilities, I feel like, to my leadership, is just to give them that space.
That's good. David, your situation is a little bit unique as well. Can you share with us how you're coping there down at Union?
Yes. I am just the tiniest bit of an introvert. So and I'm not being sarcastic. That's literally true. Just barely on the introvert side. And what that means practically is that I really enjoy socializing opportunities. I enjoy socializing. I enjoy time with people, but I need time to recharge. And man, I've been recharged for so long. I'm one of the people in the high risk category, and I have been very strict on not getting myself in any kind of risky situation. So I've been very much social isolating, physically isolating at least. So since this has started, I have kind of been roller coastering a bit on how I'm feeling emotionally myself. There'd be times that it's like, I'm longing to go shake somebody's hand. I'm longing to clap somebody on the back. I'm longing to hug somebody. Of course, my wife is here. I hug people regularly, but just missing that so much. So one of the ways I have coped with that is to, one is kind of counterintuitive, but to kind of immerse myself in contemplative prayer. There's plenty of petitionary prayer, in all of our lives. The world needs God's action so much, but contemplative prayer, just spending time with God. And I don't want to say, it sounds pretty awful to say, since I've not been able to spend time with people, I'm spending more time with God. But there might be a little bit of truth to that. When you're low and you realize, I need something that I'm not getting, and spending time just listening, not trying to draw up a list of things, God bless this person, that person. And there's a place for that, obviously. But contemplative prayer, and I've discovered that some of my students, as I've talked with them about that, have been very interested, particularly the General Board of Higher Education and Ministry is right now doing a 5-week training for chaplains and other persons on campuses, faculty and staff, for the program that they have called the Awakened Life, and a component of that is contemplative prayer. And as I've shared with that, and I'm going through that with my student leaders, I've had several students who were very interested about mindful silence and listening to God. And so we're talking about helping students to experience that aspect of what prayer is as well. Also, personally, I've spent more time, since I'm not traveling, since I'm not taking students on trips, I've actually had more time at home, and I'm at home, I'm working from home, but I've had less time that I'm working because I'm not traveling, and sitting outside under my shade tree in my front yard, and intentionally praying for all the neighbors that I can see. And of course, again, it's like, boy, did it take a pandemic for me to do that? Of course, I pray in general for my neighborhood, but just sitting and said, I see this house, and therefore I know what's going on in their lives because we stay in touch. And so I'm going to spend this intentional time praying. And again, sharing that with students. And some of them are still home. Some of them, I have some international student leaders, and some of them have not been able to come back into the States. So I have a few who are still in Brazil. And so some of the students are not on campus. Most of my student leaders are. But we began talking about that. I'm not encouraging them to sit out in the hallway and pray for everybody in the door. But it just gave us a little impetus to talk about, we're not able to do our regular kinds of things. How are we now going to shift gears, and how are we going to serve the people around us? How are we going to pray for them? So we have 5 weekly activities that student leaders are in charge of. I meet with them every week. We use the L3 process that the conference has used. We spend time in each of our weekly student leader meetings. The first L is love, loving God, loving each other. So there's check-in, there's prayer, there's scripture. The second is L is learning, and some of that can continue to be learning through more Bible study, but some of that is learning how do you lead groups, how do you pray with someone, things like that. And the third L is leading. And so I've been very impressed with the students' willingness to step up in this time to do online versions of what they've been doing, or to add something completely new that they hadn't been doing. So right now we have a group that used to meet in a coffee shop, can't do that anymore. They're still meeting online and engaging in spiritual formation together. A group of athletes, that their spirituality, the way they experience God, there's lots of conversations with them about, And I always talk to them. They never have seen it because it's too old a movie, but Chariots of Fire, when the protagonist in Chariots of Fire, who's a runner, and he says, when I run, I feel God's pleasure. And so I talk with them about that. And so the athletes group talks about that. And I've got a group that meets watching faith and social justice videos and talking about that. How can we serve? How can justice is love in the public arena? How can we be engaged in that from our faith perspective? And a group that's meeting here just in a little bit that's co-led by one of my students and the pastor of First United Methodist Church here in Barberville. They call it Conversations with Jesus. It used to be called Conversations with Jesus because it met outside the campus coffee shop, which is named Conversations. They're not doing that now. And then they would have Bible studies over conversations that Jesus had with people in the Gospels. But they're meeting on Zoom on Thursday nights at 8. So they'll be convening here just in a few minutes. And so part of what's helped me cope is seeing the students' willingness to step up and to enter new territory and to lead in ways that they hadn't imagined.
That's good. Thank you. I would love for each of you also to just share with us a glory sighting. So when we say glory sighting, we mean, how are we seeing God at work? And I think each of you have already shared that in small bits, but if there's one particular moment, one particular conversation so far from this semester that really sticks out to you, that shows that even in the midst of the chaos and the pandemic and the mask and the distancing, that you're still seeing God actively at work in your context, what would that be? And so, Brandon, why don't you go first? Do you have a glory sighting to share with us?
Sure, I'll actually share two. First one is just our Wednesday night Bible study. Like I said before, that has been meeting on Zoom, and I was kind of skeptical going into it of thinking about what that would be like, just to not be in the room and have that dynamic of just talking about Scripture and kind of walking through it, and we're going through the Gospel of Mark. And that's really been an absolute highlight of my week, because unlike where I felt like I've been putting so much time, like Ben said, investing into our leadership and kind of helping them lead and serve and develop as disciples and leaders within our ministry, the Bible study that I'm leading is open to anyone. And so it's not a time where I'm having to plan a bunch of ideas or teachings around how can we better lead within our ministry. It is literally just opening up Scripture and just talking about it each week. And that time has been really, really kind of precious. It's an hour on Wednesday nights, and it has just felt very slow and peaceful. And even though it's on a screen, it is different, but it's still just really, really nice. And it's such a blessing to just gather in that way with students, to just talk about Scripture, just to open it up and say, what do we see happening here? And what do you think it means for our lives as we follow Jesus? And back to that idea of just them being resilient, like even in the midst of all of this, their students are so willing to lean into those conversations. They're just so curious about it. And it's so interesting to hear them ask their questions. And many times I go, I don't know, I don't have an answer to that, but let's talk about it. And what do you think it means for our lives? And so that's always a blessing. And then just the other glory sighting is we expanded our way that we think and do leadership at the Wesley this past year. And we invited 6 new people onto our team. And I've been doing one-on-one check-ins with them each month. And so our September check-ins were last week. And same sort of thing. How are you doing? How can I pray for you? What are personal goals, leadership goals for this semester? And each of the 6 new ones that came on, I was almost kind of like apologetic about like, hey, I know we haven't been doing much, and how do you think leadership is going this year? And every one of them was just like, oh, this is wonderful. Like it is so, like, it's so great to be included in on these conversations and these decisions that we're making, and just part of kind of like the behind the scenes, and learning and being more invested in the ministry and getting to know people on a deeper level, and then getting to lead the groups that we're part of. We call them community life groups. And each time, like, I would have these one-on-one talks, it was almost like I would go, really? Like, you're really enjoying yourself? And they're like, yeah. They're like, this is so great that I'm getting to do this. And what felt like, from my perspective, maybe like wasting their time, or they weren't feeling useful, or I wasn't thinking that the leadership experience was living up to what my expectations would be. But for them, they're just kind of over the moon with the opportunity to do it. And so that's just such a beautiful thing that I think God is doing in each one of their lives, that they can really feel that sense of presence, and I'll even use the word calling, to just be able to serve within our community in that way. So it's beautiful to get to see and be a part of both those things.
That's good. Ben, you have a glory sighting you can share with us?
Yeah, for sure. One of the first couple of nights of in-person worship, we had a young man come forward, and before even worship began, and he asked me if I don't feel comfortable in this setting, am I free to leave? And I said, well, of course, we don't want anybody to be uncomfortable, but I would ask that if you do choose to leave, that you would come later on and let's talk about that. What triggered that red flag, and I'd like to process that with you. Well, he wound up staying for the whole event, and actually going forward and actually receiving Christ at that worship service. And then later on, he came to me and he said, I lied to you a little bit. I included in that conversation that I was atheist, and that's the reason I might feel uncomfortable with. That's not the truth. I'm actually a Muslim, and I've been wrestling with this thing called Christianity. I really felt the pull of God in my life, but I was afraid of the family dynamic and making that choice and what that would mean for me. But I'm ready to make that decision. So he came to know the Lord, and he's in our discipleship groups called Alpha. And then later on, he told me that he was going to go home and confront me about it. And he was very nervous about that. And he asked us to pray for his family. And then over the weekend, when he went home, he came home to a mother and a father who was actually sitting at their dining room table speaking to a pastor and giving their life to Christ as well. So that was a very big moment in the life of, well, his life, clearly, and that family. And I was just thankful that God allowed, Lindsey Wilson College, our leadership team, our worship team, to be a part of that story, his story, so that his testimony started off in a way that showed God's glory and what God is capable of doing when we put our faith in him. And that's just one story, but it sticks out to me every time I think about where we're at right now in campus ministry. That story really sets the tone for where we're at in the midst of crisis. Christ is still doing great things, and it's kind of been our theme so far in the semester.
That's really good. Thank you, Ben. I'm going to interrupt our glory sightings here for a minute. We have someone who's asked us a question, and I do think it's timely. I do think it's important to address this. So if I don't know which of you might have an answer, so just jump in. But the question is, how are the students dealing with racial reconciliation issues this semester? And is there any outcry about the Breonna Taylor announcement? So if any of you have something that you can share about any conversations you're having or what you're experiencing with your students about this, I would welcome you to do that.
I was actually just typing out an answer to that question. When you when you said that, we have a for lack of a better word, a program. It's really kind of a small group that we do every fall, and we call it challenge chats. And we sit down and we talk about social issues, and a lot of times we talk about headlines of things that we see in the news and kind of what's going on, and how do we but we really kind of started these conversations over the summer. We have several group chats on Facebook and GroupMe and those things. And I've really been trying to foster an environment where we feel comfortable to talk about these things together, because I think that's a big part that's missing from kind of the national conversation around this, is that we don't really know how to engage with the other side, whatever that may be. And we have students in our group who are very much kind of activists in this in this current situation with Black Lives Matter. And then we also have some students who actually their parents are police officers, and so they have a very different perspective and kind of idea of what's going on. And so it's been something that there hasn't really been a lot of outcry within our group. There's been some stuff rumbling on campus a little bit, but we've been talking about it extensively in kind of a small group setting. Again, it's something that we actually started several years back around the last election, when things got tense within on the campus then as well. And so it's something that we do every single year. We kind of revisit this of, hey, we really need to learn and be able to sit down and actually have hard conversations about things that are going on in our country, and how do we approach this as people of faith.
That's good. Thank you.
Yeah, a number of the students I've been able to talk to about it, or who've come to me to talk about it, it seems like every conversation starts with like, this just doesn't make sense. And they kind of always try to come at it with that rational mind. And so we kind of sit there and go like, yeah, it doesn't make sense. But when we deal with either perceived or actual systems of injustice that are just not working for the good that I think we all want to see in a better society and better communities and safer communities, it just kind of rattles our brains. And like when students talk about it, they're like, this just doesn't make sense. Like, why doesn't this change? And like, I don't understand, or nor could I get into political theory, and I don't understand how all of those things work. But it sometimes feels like the systems that we have are creating exactly what they're set up to do. And so if we really want to see change, then the systems have to be changed. And so that becomes like long, thoughtful work sometimes that many aren't willing to be engaged in, or don't have the patience for, because we want to just kind of point and click and make things different. And so try to be very patient in our conversations, especially when I'm listening to students, because many times they just want to be able to talk about it, and they just want a place where they can share their feelings and their opinions, and then just either not be judged for it or not be corrected, right? Just to have somebody to listen to them. And so each conversation kind of turns out to be a little bit different, but yeah, it's really, really, really hard. And it's not something that feels like it can just go away if we talk about it once. And so the knee-jerk reaction is to like, well, we're going to do a sermon series or a book study or this sort of thing. But at least with the relationships that I have with students, it seems to be any way that it can just enter into kind of the everyday side of life. because this is real for us all now, and it's much more in front of us. And while it may not affect us all in the same way, we all have kind of a responsibility to be a part of making our communities better and our country better. And so it's kind of like just building that resilience and that muscle to just not go, well, we talked about it once, now we don't have to do that anymore. So I think college students are incredibly engaged with it. They also feel very paralyzed because I don't think they see results as quick as they want to see results. And so there's a lot of this like, we'll just throw the hands up and it's never going to work. And so there's sometimes even just a little bit of coaching into just the, hey, you got to stick with this. And if it's something you're serious about, then you got to be informed, and you got to work within the channels to make real change last. And so, yeah, but it's really hard work to deal with these stuff.
Union is the place in southeastern Kentucky that has the highest proportion of persons of color to the entire population. Certainly southeastern Kentucky is not monolithically white, but almost so. And so a significant proportion of our student body are persons of color. And this is something that is being talked about a lot on campus. And so I got together with a couple of students over the summer and a few faculty members and a few staff members. And we put together some ways for our campus to talk about racial justice, because, you know, this has been going on for months and months. And so we decided to prioritize that, and even in classroom work. And so we have basically 3 initiatives going on regarding faith and racial justice as part of Union's overall commitment to a Methodist understanding of what social justice is. One is to introduce this to our freshmen in what we call the Union College experience. It's a freshman seminar class. There is a unit, they've not reached it yet, there is a unit on Union College and social justice that grounds them, insofar as a freshman seminar class can ground you, that grounds them in a Methodist understanding of justice as part of discipleship as a whole, using the general rule of discipleship that the United Methodist Church has. That says we will follow the lordship of Jesus Christ and engage in acts of worship, of devotion, of justice and compassion under the guidance of the Holy Spirit. And that is, it's in our discipline, the general rule of discipleship. And so we approach it from that way, and acknowledging that not all of our students are Methodist. In fact, most are not. Our student body, about half is from the 7 counties in southeastern Kentucky, but the other half from lots of other places. But so, people don't come to Union. Union is a regional institution that is Methodist rather than a Methodist institution that's regional, if you know what I mean. People don't come to Union because we're Methodist. But they are introduced to how we approach that. And one of the things that we're doing with the freshmen is that we've secured licensing rights to stream 3 movies over the course of the semester, 1 in September, 1 in October, 1 in November, that are popular movies that relate to racial justice themes. The first is Dear White People. The second is a little older movie called Higher Learning. The third is Just Mercy. And we provide times to discuss that. And so students and faculty, anybody related to the college, can stream that movie and watch it at no charge to them. We've taken care of that. And then we've set up times where there are discussions about these kind of things. And again, we don't come from it first from a secular perspective, although we're using a secular movie. We come from that first. Our mission at Union College is grounded in this form of discipleship, and how do we respond? And not every student, again, not every student's Christian, but that's how we approach it across campus. The second thing that we're doing is we've named it Beyond Black and White in Southeastern Kentucky. And one of our history classes is having students to do oral histories with people in Southeastern Kentucky regarding racial experiences, both positive and negative, and compiling those oral histories. Then there's a religion class that in the spring, that based on those oral histories, we're going to apply Methodist theologies of liberation to these specific stories. There's a third class, it's a theater for social change class, that's going to be from these compiled stories, write and produce and perform, probably on Zoom, vignettes from these stories. And then a fourth class even, a mass communication class, is intending to write and produce and direct a short film related to this. And so integrating a Methodist understanding of what racial justice is and how it's part of our faith and how it's part of being discipleship is really a common thread across all of this. And thirdly, one of the things that we're doing is we're doing an internal racial justice audit at Union using higher materials that have been produced for higher education, and then looking at ourselves, because there are systems that we don't intend to produce that produce inequities and inequalities, and having some kind of benchmarks and saying, how do we stack up compared to other colleges? And the administration has been all for that when I brought that forward.
Mm-hmm.
So
thank you. That's
yes.
Good. That's good. We have just a few minutes left. So our last question, which was going to be my last question anyway, but someone also put it in our Q&A box, is so how can local churches continue to help campus ministries during this time? And of course, we have two different kinds of campus ministries present. We have the Methodist College campus ministries with David and Ben, and we have Renee and Brandon, who represent Wesley Foundations, which are at state schools. But if you can just, real quick, a little less than a minute, each of you share what is something local churches could do to support you during this time. So whoever's ready, feel free to go on and answer that question.
My big piece of advice is if you have a campus ministry near you, A, to reach out, and B, no gesture, for us at least, is too small. So something, for instance, is going on right now. We've been doing a lot of outside worship around a fire pit, and we have somebody who just took down a bunch of trees. They come and fill up our firewood box whenever I need them to, and just drop off firewood for us. We have people signed up to bring us paper goods. We have somebody who, every time they see containers of Lysol wipes, they buy a few and they drop them off at the front door. And I think those kind of things, for me at least, mean so much, because there's just so many details of reorienting and reorganizing ministry right now, that to not have to worry about that stuff is so helpful. We've had people drop off gift cards for food and things like that. And so just, I just really encourage people to say, no contribution right now is too small. And anything to take any little piece off of our plates is going to be so helpful.
That's good. Thank you.
I think for Union College, since we are not doing anything, we're not meeting in person in any way, contact me, and I will send you a list of the times and the links that we're having our online meetings, and come meet my student leaders on Mondays at 8, or join our former coffee group, and just show up, not in the sense of, boy, we want you to come to our church. And you know how many churches try to interact with college students in that way. They can smell that a mile away. But when we're on Zoom now, it's not necessarily so you will come to my church. Just come and get to know the students and say, we love you, we care for you, and you're part of the big umbrella of Kentucky Methodism. And even though most of my students in campus ministries are not Methodist, they will appreciate that, they will love that, and they will grow from that.
That's good. Thank you, David.
Yeah, I just want to echo David. The building the relationship is key. These students come from all over the place, and they're looking for a place to belong. It's one of the highest needs that college students have, and when you build relationships with churches, that provides a foundation for having a home away from home in regards to church family. So like David said, give me a call, shoot me an email. Let's build that relationship even stronger than what it is, so that when we have needs, when students come up and they have needs, when we're talking about international students, some of the international students that we have, they've never seen a cold winter. They don't know what that's like to live in Kentucky, where you can wake up and it's 70, middle of the day it's 90, and then at night it's 40 degrees. They don't know what that's like. So we have people that need coats and gloves and hats and things like that. So let's just keep the lines of communications open. Let's build stronger relationships with each other, with the students, and meet the needs of those students on campus.
That's good.
Yeah, I've always really loved getting to go and visit churches and take students along with me when they're available to. You know, weekends look very different for every different student, but most of the time, because I'm at a campus ministry, I'm pretty free on Sunday mornings. So if I'm not attending my local church, I like to visit other places and put on my schedule. And that ranges from everything to just show up and give an announcement to bring some students and lead the entire service if they're available. And so it works both ways. It also we get to share about what our ministry does to the local church, but what Ben is saying too, when I get to take those students along with me, they get to see an expression of church that is maybe completely different from what they grew up with, or maybe if they didn't even grow up in a local church. So them to see that sense of community is just as possible after they leave the Wesley, that they can find that with whatever community they move into. And so getting to visit is one of the things that we really like to do if it's possible. And I know there again, pandemic has kind of changed all of that, but still having the opportunity just to go and share and meet some people and say hello and tell them about the good things that God's doing on a campus. Because as the local church's extension ministry, like we are their ministry to these college campuses and to these college students. And so when we show up and share about what God's doing, it's because of their support to have us do it. And so it's just as much they get to share in that glory too, just like we do. So I like to get to tell them that they're a part of this.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just add in there, you know, of course, you can always pray for our campus ministries. These are 4 of our campus ministers. We have 6 more, so we have 10 total campus ministries spread across Kentucky. And we are just so thankful for each of them and the ministries that they have. And so wherever your local church is, chances are there's a campus ministry within an hour or so of where you are. And so I would encourage you to seek them out and to ask, if your local church, ask your pastor, are we doing anything to support that ministry? And I guarantee you these campus ministers would love a call to say, what can we do for you? So I just really encourage you to do that. Thank you to David, Renee, Brandon, and Ben for being with us and sharing with us tonight. It's been a real joy to hear from you guys. And thank you for everyone else who tuned into our webinar. This does it for tonight. Thank you for tuning in and for learning about our campus ministries, and we hope you have a good evening.